Hey everybody, Matt Powers here. I hope that you've had a wonderful week and weekend. Back here, I'm back in Missouri. I went to Utah and I spoke at the Utah Farm Conference. And if you're paying attention, you know that I try to include you all in that and include you all in the live feed. But what consistently seems to happen is at colleges and universities, they block live functions. Probably it's due to classroom management and control of content. Because they're taping all the teachers right now, and then they're going to be firing a lot of them and just running the videotapes online. And that's what's happening to a lot of teachers right now, and that's probably why it's happening. My brother's a college professor, and I was a public ed teacher. I was actually offered when I retired from public ed to be one of those teachers that taught 1,000 students through a computer. And that's, what's happening everywhere. So anyway, I want to talk about this. This is very incredible. The talk had a huge reaction when I gave it, and it's not something I usually talk about. It's something that I believe. It's something that I talked about with my friends and family, and I've mentioned it online here and there, and I just don't promote it very much, but it's very true to my heart, and yeah, let's just start talking about it. So the seed economy is a concept that's ancient. It's just something I gave words to something that already existed. And a regenerative tomorrow is something we all want. And so it's really fun and it's thrilling, but I want to dive in here. And first off, I want to, let me grab this right here. I want to talk about who I am. It looks like it's not going to jump around today, which is kind of awesome. It seems like I can just put this down this time, which would be awesome because then I wouldn't be looking down the entire time and instead just be looking at you guys. So first off, let's make sure this works. All right, so who am I? I'm this guy. You guys see me every afternoon, or if you haven't seen me before, I'm Matt Powers, but who is that really, right? So I was a musician. That's who I was. That's what I always wanted to be, and I was this New York City musician. These are the kind of people I hung out with, played music with. And so when I met my wife, my life started changing, and we started our family. And as we started our family, right when we had James, my wife got cancer, and my wife got thyroid cancer, and we did radiation, and within 3 months she got crazy melanoma, and not like a little mole, like a huge amount of melanoma that almost reached her lymph nodes. And it changed my life because I started, questioning everything and not just taking, some pharmaceutical rep called a doctor, and their piece of advice on things. I decided to actually look at the science and start learning science and understanding what can be done and what's right and what's wrong. And it led us on an incredible journey. We're actually going to be writing a book about it. It's a Kickstarter stretch goal that we had at our last Kickstarter last year. But my wife and I are going to be doing an audiobook for Audible about our lives and our relationship and, dealing with cancer and this whole thing and finding permaculture. So during that process, we left New York City. I left that job, that amazing job. I was playing music with John Cusimano, who's married to Rachel Ray. And we had Saturday Night Live's drummer. We had Guitar Player Magazine's editor as a guitarist. It was crazy incredible. We hung out with people like Billy Gibbons and played with them at South by Southwest and fun stuff like that. So I left all that because my wife asked me to leave because she prayed about it and that's what she felt. And so I prayed about it and I got the confirmation and we left. And it was very hard to do. Knowing that it was the right thing to do didn't make it easier. Leaving a job like that where you just get to play music and hang out, pretty ridiculously easy. So I moved out west. I continued doing that for a time, but I became a school teacher, and I taught everything. This is me teaching cooking one day before Christmas break, and I was the English teacher for all the sophomores. I was also credentialed in history. So I was working on a humanities program, and we had digital music production that I taught and taught songwriting. I recorded student artists and put them online, made records with them, and I started teaching permaculture. And so it was really an outgrowth of me gardening to make food that was clean for my wife and my children and myself that led to permaculture, because at a certain point in organic gardening, you hit this wall, it feels like, where it's all anecdotal and you're like, wait, is this just what someone's grandma said? Where's the actual science? And so I got really fed up with all just the storytelling and the anecdotal and like, oh, this is what works best in a garden, because that's ludicrous. We all live in different environments, so why would it be that that works best for everyone? And I lived in a very extreme climate, so it was really important to me that I understood how to work like this in a climate where the soils get to 140 degrees when they're not watered. And when they're watered, they're 120 degrees. So it's really important that in this kind of climate, in a desertifying Mediterranean climate that's burning and eroding and desertifying before our very eyes, we're losing the Sierra Nevadas. It's really important that we do something like this in that region to bring it back. And we can. We absolutely can. And this is a great example. This is in that 140 degree soils. This is horizontal. This is a plant that's available now at rareseeds.com. Red Aztec spinach. The seeds that are on there are my seeds. I'm really proud of this. This grew in 140 degree temperatures. And it thrived. It formed seeds. It formed leaves. It grew for months. This is 2 to 3 months into a serious drought in California. And they're doing just fine. So this is truly incredible, and this is a seed that you can get today. And it's from me. It's my seed that I grew for you. So permaculture. Let's talk about permaculture for a minute, because permaculture really kind of pulled me out of the school. I wrote this book for homeschool and public school. It was really for middle schools and high schoolers at first, and then it kind of turned into the middle school. Well, you can use it as an introduction in high school, and you can use it as a supplement in high school. But my textbook, the larger one that's coming out, really is the one for for a full year in high school. And you could probably even break it up over 2 years because it's so in-depth. This is what it all turned into, my series that began here, and it spread to all the continents except for Antarctica, but we're working on Antarctica right now. And so this is the new book. This is the high school volume. This radically updates things. If you like permaculture, if you read Bill Mollison's Permaculture, A Designer's Manual, check out Dr. Lane Ingham's work, and then you'll realize the soil chapter is, it's old school. It's actually not progressive. It doesn't recognize the actual mechanisms of nature. If you look for fungi in Permaculture, A Designer's Manual by Bill Mollison, you'll find an old paradigm of understanding the way fungi works. You won't find Paul Stamets' understanding, and then you won't even find, Peter McCoy's, which is even greater. People really need to check out Peter McCoy. People know about Paul Stamets. I feel like he doesn't teach mycology properly. He leaves out tons of information, and Peter McCoy really has done an amazing job compiling the information in a logical and an organized framework so that people can understand. So Radical Mycology is his book. You should check that out. And he's actually one of my peer reviewers and editors. So this is just a small sampling of the people involved in my book, because obviously I'm not an expert. I'm not in Mexico. I'm not the grandson of Bill Mollison in Mexico making permatexture structures. I'm not a mycological expert traveling all over the world writing books and teaching people. I'm not working for the UN and teaching more people about permaculture than anyone else on Earth. I'm not turning Saudi Arabia into a green paradise from desert. I'm not making working on a third of an acre, making $70,000 a year. I'm not traveling the world redoing landscapes on a large scale so that commercial farm operations can be extraordinarily profitable without destroying the environment. I could just keep going, because that's what these people are doing. These people are incredible, and I feature them in my book as pathways to education. So you may feel like you're the urban farmer. Oh, but no, I feel like I'm in the desert. Oh, no, and it's all different. It's all based around what you need and what your environment is. And so that's why I compiled it all. I work with Dr. Lane Ingham. She is my soil mentor. She's absolutely incredible. And we'll talk a lot about her today. And then I created this book for elementary schools, and this book for elementary schools. This is a story, and this is more like the Richard Scarry books, where it has like the scene, and then it describes parts of the scene. That's kind of what I did with that one, and I love those books, don't you? My translations are finally making their way around the world too. I have 5 that are coming out right now. Currently, we have Arabic, Polish, and Spanish available on our website. I met Jerry years ago. He is the one who inspired me to start seed saving and save money. And we've been friends for a while. And what happened was they hired me here, and now I'm here in Missouri. He pulled me out. And then I'm doing these afternoon talks, and I'm doing speaking engagements like this one I did at the Utah Farm Conference this weekend, which was absolutely incredible. Daniel Saladin and I got to hang out all night after I did my talk. So I got to, hear from Daniel, all this stuff. It was awesome. So today I want to talk about how seeds are the currency of the future, and they're also the currency of the past. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so what do I mean by that is that seeds, we started collecting them because we recognized the mechanism that they were, started eating them because they were readily available food, and we started collecting them, and then we started having an abundance. And when you have an abundance, interesting things happen. Only in an abundance economy, when you're not just surviving, do you have currencies. Otherwise, because civilization is built on this idea that we have enough abundance to be pleasant, to build up a civilization so that we're not nomadic, we're not constantly following animals, not constantly following the food source. So currency implies abundance. And what happened was we all started collecting seeds, and then we got so many seeds that we started doing things with our seeds, started trading with our seeds. We started trying different foods with our seeds. I mean, this is where alcohol comes from. This is where bread comes from. We had so many seeds, we started playing with them and mashing them, mixing them with water. And then someone left theirs out because we had so much. And then it became bubbly with the wild yeast from the air, which is a fungi. And what happened was someone was like, I don't want to eat that. And the mom or the dad was like, oh, you're going to eat it. We're going to put it in the fire and you're going to eat that because that's good food. And so they took their mush, their porridge, and they cooked it, and it turned out to be the first bread, and they totally recognized it as special, and it began that process. The same thing happened with alcohol and wine. Well, they had juice. They were making juice. They had so many plants to juice, so much fruit, and at the end of the day, there was leftovers. And then someone left it, and it got all bubbly, and they were like, oh, it's all bubbly, but we don't have anything else, so I guess I'll drink the bubbly juice. And then they were like, holy cow, this makes my stomach feel really good. Because it wasn't like strong alcohol, it was like a probiotic drink, right? Because you guys know that kombucha and probiotic drinks like Waterkeeper have teeny little bits of alcohol, and that's really good for the gut. When we bottle things, after like that bubbly period, when we bottle things, we start making like real strong alcohol. And that didn't really happen at first. We didn't have, bottles that we could seal. It would go from that light, that pre-alcohol probiotic stage into slightly alcoholic and then into vinegar. So very interesting that most people don't know about. And it's all comes from the fact that we had too many seeds. Well, not too many, just an extra, just an abundance, you know what I mean? So today we have the economy of the dollar, and we work for the dollar, and then we spend dollars on food. And then we give that dollar back to the economy. So what's happening is a very unsettling trend, and we all recognize it, but we're really not talking about it. What's going on in America is we're working harder for money, and we're getting paid less because everything's being inflated. Jobs are fewer, they're less reliable, and we're working more hours. Careers are lasting 5 years or less. They expect kids to have 5 to 6 or more careers in one lifetime. So forget about mastering one set of skills and becoming a master of that and developing that throughout your life. You have to master 5 or 6 different jobs and then be done with them and quit and get fired or whatever in 5 years. That's what they're saying average is going on right now, which is horrific. Because, everyone's having to move, everyone's losing their equity, people don't have roots they can lay down, our communities aren't building. And then what's happening with our food? Well, we're spending that harder to get lesser amount of money on this food, and the prices are rising because crop failure is happening. Foodborne illnesses are on the rise. Nutrition is dropping like a stone, and we can't keep up. This economy of the dollar is becoming bigger as the future is becoming dimmer for our children. And so that makes me sad. Doesn't that make you sad? That's not right. That doesn't seem like progress at all. That doesn't seem like civilization or civilized. So what we really want, and this seems counterintuitive unless we really look at it, is we want to work less and we want to spend less, which means that we want to shrink the economy of the dollar. Seems kind of controversial, right? All right, so yeah, I thought about this because, that would make us happy to work less and then have to spend less because that means we would save more. So really what we want to do is we're going to have to continue to work for money in the money economy, but something will change. We're going to start spending money on seeds and participating in the seed economy. And that means that we're growing our own food, we're saving our own seed, and that causes an exponential growth in your food availability, your seed availability, your health, because as your seeds adapt, they become stronger and healthier. As your food adapts, and as your soil builds, all these things increase and get better and better. And so your health in tandem improves. And you start saving money. Their food's going to cost so much, the seeds are going to cost more and more, but you're beyond that. You're in the seed economy, you're safe. So this is what would happen over time. The economy of the dollar would shrink. And the seed economy would grow, and prosperity, peace, and food stability would reign. And so, and this means we would relocalize too. All warfare is over resources. It's over a scarcity of resources. Why did the Europeans leave Europe? Why did they go and practice imperialism, colonialism, and all that stuff? It was because they had used up their resources. They had destroyed their land base. They've been fighting wars forever on that landscape. And you guys know that the Romans, the way they salted the earth of their enemies was use lime and gypsum. So think about that before you do that, because you're doing what the Romans did to their enemies. That's not good. You don't want to be your own enemy, right? So peace starts in the garden, starts in our local communities. Prosperity starts in our ownership of these entities. When we grow our own food, we are controllers of our prosperity. And then food stability. When it's all local, there's not going to be any great destabilization of our culture if our food, fiber, and our food, fuel, and fiber and medicine are all local. What would they disrupt? Oh no, trucks can't get into town with their supplies for the Walmart. Oh well, we're all set. We don't need to rely on these people. We don't need to rely on these corporations. We can be independent and free. So the seed economy is the economy of infinite growth that we all know and we all in our hearts want. Because life works this way. Life creates more life and grows and spreads. This idea that everything is always diffusing, energy is always lost, is not even true. Syntropy, not entropy, is real. Life systems defy entropy. All right, so local businesses also work this way. And, decentralization is kind of like a scary word to a lot of people. But the reality is it's localization that we're really talking about. Decentralization is a byproduct of localization. And it all starts with farmers. And farmers of all stripes. So food, fuel, fiber, and medicine, like I talked about. So what do farmers and farming represent? I believe that they represent freedom, self-reliance, and entrepreneurism. So the largest landowner, wow, it didn't do this the right way instead of bunching it. But it's okay, because this reminds me and I can just tell you. The largest landowners in America are ranchers and farm owners, and they're being targeted. and they're the focus of a ton of malarkey right now. So regulations are smothering small farms, and they favor the large farms. And so they can pass these really onerous regulations that kill the small farm and are easy for the industrialized farm. Well, they're not even farms. The industrial corporate farms, they're factories. They're not farms. Just like Food Inc. says, we shouldn't give them that title. So they're making dangerous situations worse. We talked about how the USDA recommended feeding down cows to regular cows, which we all know they're herbivores. It doesn't matter if all protein's the same under a microscope. You don't feed animals themselves. And that's what caused mad cow disease. But good luck trying to tell the USDA that when Joel Salatin was telling them that. Stuff like that. I mean, like the Dust Bowl was caused by the government telling people what to do with farming. And consistently, the more we listen to large corporations and the government when it comes to farming, we have serious problems economically. And farmers, there's been a shift of wealth, and farmland is kind of like the last bastion. In our forests, our national forests that they're selling off right now, those are also our last bastion. So foreign interests are buying up farming land. Farming conglomerates are buying up farming land. The way our tax law has been modified, it's been modified so that families cannot continue to pass on wealth to their children in this country, which favors the banks, favors large corporations, and favors the nobility of other nations. And so, like in Europe, what was the difference between the nobles and the peasants? Why did we come to America? They owned all the land. We were all just renters, mortgages. And so they had uncorruptible wealth, untaxable wealth, and that's why they all own the banks and still have all their old lands in Europe. So what we need to do is have laws that actually favor American citizens rather than corporations and foreign interests. Because Jefferson wanted us to be a nation of landowners because we would actually fight for our own land because we would actually own it. Very few people in America own their land anymore. We have mortgages, which are through banks, which are owned by larger banks, which are owned by world banks, which governments answer to. So it's really important that we just take this power back that belongs to us, that are local in our local areas, and they're the key. So what can we do to make that change? Well, we can buy local food. We can buy local fuel, fiber, and medicine. We can change our local regulations to outregulate them. We can get active and remove all these roadblocks, whether they be politicians, banks, or foreign interests. I mean, there's no reason in the world why Italy should own toll roads in Texas. And then you pay a toll that goes to Italy. Doesn't make any sense. There's no reason in the world why we should allow China to have private airports in Ohio and fly in and fly out pigs that they raise here without any regulatory, oversight. Those kinds of things just shouldn't be. So we need to get busy with our businesses. We need to fight back by taking back that equity into our communities. We don't need to demonize anyone. We just need to recognize what is happening and do better. So we need to form local business guilds. Farmers, ranchers, markets, restaurants, local communities, CSAs, co-ops. We all need to work together so that we can support each other. And so that we can get our land back into our communities, and that we can use our land properly so that it's not illegal to have front yard lawns, so it's not illegal to feed people who are hungry. And at the same time, farmers can do this. They can sequester carbon, reverse desertification. We can flip all those lawns into gardens, and we can reboot local economies. Now, see, that seems like a lot, but the most incredible thing is that farmers are the linchpin in this too. So carbon, everyone's talking about, there's so much carbon, right? They're all freaking out. Carbon's organic matter. So let's just be very, very clear about that. It is organic matter. And not only that, corn is a C4 grass. It's very, very good at trapping carbon. This C4 grasses rose after the last huge amount of carbon was in the atmosphere after a certain event. And so what happens is corn in America, this is a study from Bioscience 2010, it captures 400 times the amount of annual CO2 released every year. The corn we grow captures 400 times the amount of CO2 released by all our activities every year. Right. And then when they desiccate in the field, they release that carbon back into the atmosphere. But if we composted them in the field with windrows, and we did it in such a way that was balanced, then it would, not all of it, so much of it would be sequestered. Elaine Ingham has been working in South Africa with a particular group, and they are sequestering 6 tons of carbon per hectare. They're building feet of soil a year. Feet. They don't even bother farming anymore because they're making so much money with carbon credits. This is something that can happen anywhere in the world. So the carbon cycle. This is the carbon cycle. This is from my new book. As we can see here, diffusion is what's going on when the CO2, the excess CO2 gets taken down to the ocean. This is what's causing ocean acidification. It's actually not acidic. It's alkaline, but it's slightly more acidic. And that's just wreaking havoc on all of the life in the ocean. And so that's half of the CO2 that's in excess is in the oceans. So we have to do different treatments there than we would do up here. But they both involve life. We need to trap the excess carbon back where it came from. And it came from fossilized carbon. And fossilized carbon is fossilized organic matter. So what we have here is we have a situation where we need to be growing plants and raising and breeding animals as much as possible and building soil as much as possible to take all this excess back in. And we absolutely can. So one of the things we must do is we must recognize that this is not what soil is. This is the constituents of dirt. This isn't life oriented yet. This is not soil. So Dr. Elaine Ingham, my soil mentor, as I mentioned earlier, she's the person teaching people about what soil is, what life infused dirt is, and that's what soil is. You need life. So you can't grow soil life in a petri dish. She's the one who proved this because plate counts for soil life don't work. It's balderdash. So what's going on is the science before Dr. Elaine Ingham was based upon them taking soil life and putting them on a petri dish on a plate and then counting them over time. They're not going to grow. They don't grow on anything but soil with the constituents of what soil life is. You need all the trophic layers. You need to be observing it from the actual environment, not from a petri dish. So this is where she began. This is a really, really fabulous quote. I'm going to stand off to the side and I'll read it. Once you have the organisms in the soil, they will work for you as long as you don't kill them. Healthy soil, properly maintained, can reduce or eliminate the need for irrigation, the need for hoeing or weeding, the need for tilling, and can decrease water consumption up to 70% in some places and increase yield significantly and increase nutrition in those foods. On an average 300-acre farm, we generally reduce costs for growers by $200,000 in the first year. And we got to make a choice. Is it soil or dirt? We need to focus on... Oh man, I can't even read this. All right, so compost. Oh, that was what compost was. So compost is a combination of humus, soil life, and nutrients. And so compost is the backbone for soil life. It's the foundation of the foundation. And because soil is the foundation for everything, for all of our systems. And to make compost, and I'm always talking about thermophilic compost. If I'm talking about another form of compost, I'll say moldering compost for cold compost or vermicompost. I don't agree with moldering compost as safe because we'll get to that. All right, so browns, 1/3, greens 1/3, manure 1/3. So this is going to be plants that have gone to seed, plants that have not gone to seed, so that there's mostly carbon. This has got the enzymes and nitrogen and sugar still in it. And this is going to be a source of nitrogen. All right, and so you're going to layer it, and you're going to start with the bottom brown so that it has aeration, and then you're going to go just one after the other in layers. Just manure, brown, green, all the way up. And you're going to use this fencing on it to keep it all together because you don't want to miss a piece and then have something be 7 days and then something else be 5 days. And then you water it until it leaks and then you cover it. Like that. Okay, and so 15 days at 131 Fahrenheit to 140. In the first 3 days, it'll heat up really quickly. And you want to monitor it with a soil thermometer, like 15, 20 bucks. And then you want to turn it at least 5 times minimum. You turn it when it gets too cold. You turn it when it gets too hot. And it's important to keep it in this range because this is where the beneficial bacteria are and fungi are. There's thermophilic fungi. If you have not heard of it, go look it up. So above 140, you start to get the strepta. I forget the name, but you end up only with one type of bacteria mainly, and it's not that great. But in this range, you get exactly the population you want. You get the exact effect you want. And so what that is it kills weed seeds, it kills pathogens, parasites, and parasitic eggs. So woody compost, that's fungal foods. Bacterial compost, that's going to be like the fresh greens, simple sugars. So compost extract. Have you ever gotten humic acid before? That's just that's a fungal food, but that's just compost extract, which is just passively watered compost, and so and gently it comes out. The water that comes out is humic acid. So compost tea is different. It's aerated in a liquid medium in a microperf bag, and what happens is the soil life detaches from the compost particles and goes into the water and starts proliferating. And so you have this liquid that's just full of soil life. So if you want to have fungal food in your compost tea, you're going to add fish hydrolysate or fish emulsion is another way to say it, or chitin, or I pronounce it chitin, but it's chitin is how it's pronounced. I was confused at first when Elaine Ingham was talking about it. And then fresh plant materials or molasses, which is a sugar, a plant-based sugar, and that's a bacterial food. And then actually, it took me a long time to find that information. Everyone thinks compost tea, you just put molasses in it, and I think that's because YouTube's just popular and not as sophisticated as we'd like it to be. So you can apply it as a foliar spray or water into the soil. It's important to know that you can water it down 1 to 2 or 1 to 4 parts to 1 part compost tea to 4 parts water, that kind of thing. So apply it as that. This is the thing, because the reason we want the fungal and the bacterial is because it actually decides which plants belong there. So evergreens here, totally fungal. Ammonium is the food that they love. They hate nitrates. Nitrates will make them sick. They're over here in they're acidic soils. So weeds feed on nitrate. They're completely alkaline. So in between here is most of our food. And so that's why everyone's like, oh, you need to be around pH 7. It's a rough, general thing. Yeah, but that doesn't help us that much. So if you're like, oh man, my brassicas are doing great. My blueberries, oh, they're awful. Well, that's because you got alkaline soil with the actinobacterial element, and that is going to consume the fungi. Right? So understanding this spectrum is really incredibly important. The other thing to understand is this is why we don't till. And you can till with a harrow. You can go to the first inch or 3 inches. That's fine. That's really not tillage, flipping the soil over and mixing the layers. Mixing the first top 1.5 inches is already going to totally happen in nature. But the way we plow fields and we pulverize the soil structure sends it back, and it makes it all nitrates. And that's why we have weedy fields after we till. Because first of all, we're turning over all the new weed seeds. All that soil was created there by weeds, and so there's ancient seeds are all mixed up each layer. So if we build our own soil and calibrate our own pH, all of that starting with the top and not tilling it, we're not going to have anything. So in other words, if we grow a field of cover crop and then We do a little bit of harrowing, and just in the first top 1.5 inches, we just like till it a little bit. It's not going to be all tilled under. It's going to be mixed a little bit in the soil and kind of mashed down. That's all going to break down and turn into soil. And because it was annuals, the cover crop you chose, there's no seeds. So now there's no light that gets to the weed seeds. And it's new soil, and it was a legume, so that's nitrogen rich. So why are we tilling? You know what I mean? All right. So when we don't till, we give them a choice, because the soil has both ammonium and nitrate. It has both areas that are alkaline and acidic. And then the roots and the fungi work together to find and get those elements. The thing is, even for most perennials, they need some nitrates for vegetative growth. Most annuals need some ammonium for reproductive growth. They do different things. So that's why, when I talk about pH being pH 4 and then 1 micrometer next to it, pH 9, that's why it doesn't make any sense for us to get the little thing and shake it up and be like, my pH is this. That doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. But that's how they sell garden magazines. That's how they simplify all this stuff down to a mess, because when we try to garden with that, and we get horrible crop failures. I've done it this way. I listened to them, and then I stopped believing in them, and I started studying the science. So, many of you have probably seen the soil food web before. It has all these elements in it, but I have not found any that have this many arrows. And the arrows are really critically important, because they really show you what is happening in the soil and how important each one of these elements is. And if we are missing one of these elements, how the imbalance will cause havoc. And then you have too many of this or too many of that. And then it's, oh no, I have corn borers, or I have, that's what's going on if you have an imbalance in this. So pH changes every micrometer. So no tillage, right? Well, not exactly. Earthworks and certain types of tillage work really well. So this is an incredible thing right here. Using Earthworks, they were able to turn, and perennial plants, trees and shrubs, turn an area that was desertified into an area in 9 years, into an area that's super productive, that is reversing erosion, sequestering carbon, and taking a 10,000-year-old problem and turning it into a profitable situation for the people who are there. And what's so incredible about this is, this started off as a project between World Bank and China in the Loess Plateau, where the Yellow River is from. The Yellow River starts here. So the reason it's yellow is from the silt, from the erosion, from this area, the Loess Plateau. This is where agriculture began, and the Han Dynasty began in China. So this is where, and just like in the Middle East, where agriculture began, it's a desert. Very important to recognize that. And it's tillage, followed by grazing, that makes deserts. So they spent, they worked on 35,000 square kilometers, spent $150,000, and then got a project extension to do 35, oh no, it started off as, sorry, I'm reading this. It started off as 15,000 square kilometers, and it was a budget of $150,000, and then switched to 35,000 square kilometers, and the budget changed to $500,000. That seems like a big number, but what's incredible is it became viral. And that's actually, not a lot of money. That's $14 per hectare per year. So that's something affordable that anyone can do, cost-wise. But what's incredible is it went viral. And they even changed Chinese law so that it could spread across all of rural China. And they made it so that you cannot graze on 20% steep grade or steeper in China now, in rural China, because it's reserved now for perennials and trees. And so a revegetation effort is huge, and it's happening. I know people who are there. I know people who have lived there and seen it happening. I know people who are living there now and seeing it happening. There's a lot of propaganda about governments and political nonsense about governments going on, but the people in these countries all over the world, whether it be Syria or China or even Russia, or these places, families are there. Families are doing great things. Farmers are there. There are great things happening, regeneration happening, despite all these wars that governments are fighting. So we need to bring this information to the rest of the world because we can flip all the deserts. It's possible. And all these conflicts, all these wars they're fighting over resources, they no longer have to plague our families, no longer have to cut communication lines and stop progress. We can spread this and spread peace because this stability creates peace when you don't have to look over your border to see what the other countries have and that you don't. So this is it happening in Saudi Arabia. Like I talked about Neil Speckman, you can see the check dams here on contour, just like topographic lines. They intersect at a 90-degree angle, the water flow. So this is why it's all greening. You can see here, it's just like white tan. And it is that brutal. It's like a moonscape. But here, in the swale and the earthwork, where it's perfectly flat, capturing all that flood water every time it rains. Because when it rains, it floods. It's like California right now. Everyone's like, oh, we got so much rain. There's so much flooding. What's going on? Yeah, it's because we mismanaged our forests and we've been draining all the water out of all the reservoirs, all the aquifers, and then stealing all the runoff from the mountains and preventing it from actually trickling down the mountain in mountain streams and creeks. And that is creating a situation that's causing all those fires and causing all those drought situations. And it's completely reversible and it's all man-made. It's really simple. But most people actually don't go to these places. They actually don't interact with the plants and they actually don't look at the whole picture. They're just looking at their business or what the, a politician says on a TV. And this is real. This is not. You can go onto a Google Earth and go here and check it out. This is the Albeida project, and this is only 3 years. They went from the desert brutality to an emerging desert savanna-like area, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing, and this is real. Stuff on the TV may not be real anymore, but this is real. So, in the U.S. there's 163,000 square kilometers of lawn. So, what if we flipped all that into food production? Well, we could certainly be sequestering carbon, and we could certainly get rid of all those chemicals that we're pouring onto the grass. We could, if we did till them, though, I would say that we would be releasing carbon. We would have to do no-till gardening in those areas, and that's also very easy to do. So, actually, let me go back. This is Curtis Stone. He's doing incredible work in British Columbia. What he did was he started working on 6 different plots, a third of an acre, and he started making $70,000 a year because that's just how easy it is. We have farmers now who have acres and 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 acres of land. And they don't make any money. They're all broke because they don't understand the plants. They don't understand the soil. They've been listening to the government and they're listening to the extension office too much, listening to the chemical companies. And they've got all this money invested in chemicals. They've got all this money invested in equipment, and they're stuck. We need to bring them the answers so they can get unstuck. Those farmers have families. Those farmers are our family members. We need to save them too. We can't demonize them. They got tricked. They went to college, they paid, and then they got told all this chemical baloney. And you know what? It's all throughout the colleges. Very few organic programs even have organic practices. They just slapped organic onto it and have like 1 or 2 organic classes, and the rest is chemical ag. So we got to let people know the answers are out there, and they're amazing, and they can help everyone. And we don't need to demonize anyone. We can help everyone. This is Jean-Martin Fortier. He's in Quebec. It's very much colder there. He's a longer dormant season. He is working on a quarter of an acre and making $150,000 a year Canadian dollars. So this is just another example. If you want to learn more about him, check out 6 Figure Farming on YouTube with Jean-Martin Fortier. Jean-Martin Fortier is how you pronounce it. So he's got incredible amounts of free information online. And if you want to get into market gardening, The Market Gardener, which is the book he wrote, is superb. Superb. I can't recommend it enough. I read that and I based my book on it, and he and Curtis both reviewed their sections in my book. Neil Speckman reviewed my section on Albedo in his book. John D. Liu, the documentarian who documented the Loess Plateau project, reviewed my section on the Loess Plateau in my book. I work with all these people. They're all real. You can verify what they're doing. You can look into the science and figure out who inspired them, and then you can verify that science. You can follow it all the way back. This is not fantasy land. This is real, and it's coming our way fast. And no one's seeing it because there's not getting any support. It's individuals like me and all those people I'm mentioning that are working with other individuals who care. And we're going out into the world and healing it, one person or one piece of land at a time. And it's going to come. It's unstoppable what's coming. The change that is coming is going to heal the world. So just keep listening. There's a lot coming. All right, so broad forking. This is something we can do on the small scale. And they do that at both those farms. They're constantly broad forking every few weeks to keep the soil loose and the pressure not so high, the PSI, the pressure per square inch, not so high so that those carrots can go down deep, so that it's easy for those roots to go deep. So some of the techniques they use super short season crops and then stack them. They use super fast crop rotations, which means they're transplanting when they're harvesting the same day. They use regular addition of compost to fight transplanting shock. They're doing harrowing, so they're not doing deep tillage. They're doing a 1.5 inch harrow. They're doing flame weeding, so when they weed, they're actually not disturbing the soil. They're doing tarping and smothering of weeds, so they're solarizing the weeds, and they're covering them, letting the weeds come up and go, oh no, there's nothing, there's no light, and then they die, and then they open it up and it's bare earth, and they can plant in that whatever they want, and no competition. They have 30-inch beds, which matches the Elliott Coleman tools, and those Elliott Coleman tools are amazing, and I think I might have a picture of one here. So what about large-scale farmers and ranchers? Because, I mean, according to the USDA, those small-scale farmers don't even qualify as farmers. They're considered gardeners. So the yeoman's plow is an incredible thing. This is a subsoil plow. And what's going on here is it doesn't overturn the soil. It instead does a rip or a cut in the land, and it allows you to plant trees so that the roots go really deep. You could if you do this before a rain event, the rain will just seal those back up, especially in clay. It'll just seal them back up. So what you can do is you can rip, and then you can inject compost tea in the rips, and then plant trees in the rips on contour, and you can do a lot of amazing stuff. This is a critical component for anyone wanting to improve their pastures. So what I mean by that is that, let's say you've got a pasture. Well, you don't want to put swales in it to retain water, because look, you need to plant a tree in that swale to hold that dirt there, and then you've got runoff, and then the silt builds up there, and swales are useful for certain things. In my garden in California, the reason my soil didn't wash away like everyone's garden soil washed away is because of this. And swales should be used in certain climates, absolutely. That's why holistic management grazing wasn't used on the Loess Plateau. That's why they removed grazers and did this. Subsoil ripping allows infiltration of water every step of the way. So it doesn't travel far enough to create much runoff, and doesn't contain much silt or anything like that. So this really preserves the pasture in a totally different way. All right, so this really shows you here my setup here. This is one of those swale berms. This is the swale path, so this is perfectly flat. And then you can see here my furrow, which is kind of like a swale, mini swale, where I'll be planting. And that turned into this, and then we chopped and dropped, and see how all that is going to cover my seeds now. And so you can see the trees and my boys. And so when you use large-scale analysis of land, like the Keyline scale of permanency or the Regenerative platform, you're going to use the keyline geometry and definitions for landforms. So this is the key point. I'm just going to bring it up. You guys, it's okay. If you've not heard of this, that's fine. The key point is that part of the landscape, and you can see here how it's green. It's the part of the landscape that changes from concave to convex, and where it starts depositing the clays and silts and finer particles because it slows down. And over time, all that collection is a perfect place for water storage because clay holds water. And so you have this forming this natural area that holds water, that you could put a pond, or a water catchment thing and then connect on a swale, on contour, out on the key line, and that would distribute water throughout this area in a regenerative way, and would cause a huge amount of regeneration. Now, when we do keyline patterning, it gets a little bit different. You would go parallel off the guideline. So if the guideline was at the top, you would go down by 10 meters each way, or 10 feet or whatever, and you would rip. And what happens is when you go off a contour, you go slightly off contour every time you go off parallel. So this you'll get slightly off contour, which is good because it would be too much water and create springs, and would create mud and a mess, and maybe anaerobic conditions if we just had it perfectly on contour the whole way down. And so and this has happened in places. So this actually gently releases water on both sides as you go down. If you want to learn more about this stuff, I highly recommend Darren Daugherty's Agrarian's Handbook. The first 2 chapters are out. The 3rd chapter is on the way. So he goes through climate first, and then he looks at the geography, and then he looks at where's the water, and then he plans out the access to the water, so the roads. And then he decides where his trees will go. Then he decides where his buildings will go. And only then will he decide where to put his fencing. And so this is a logical framework that allows you to know where things go. It's very, very useful for very many people, and because it also includes the soil, the economy, and the energy of that farm site, it's very useful in commercial enterprises. So I highly recommend that. So what are some examples of regenerative agriculture in action? Well, Mark Shepard's New Forest Farm is a great example. This is oak savanna that he's bringing back, because oak savanna is the original biome that this area was, the original ecosystem of the Midwest. But good luck trying to find it. It's basically extinct. So he's bringing that back. Polyface Farm is absolutely incredible farm. I get to spend time with Daniel Saladin. Joel Saladin's dad started this farm. Joel Saladin ran it. And then when Daniel was in his late teens, early 20s, he took over the farm. And it took years of transitioning. But by that time, he was running the farm, and he has been running the farm for many years. So when we talk about Polyface Farms and Joel Saladin Farm and the Saladins, it's really important that we mention Daniel, because Daniel's the one running the farm. So what's amazing about their setup is that instead of yeah, get them cow, they're not like wrestling up the cows. They peel back the fence gently, and the cows are invited in, and they go willingly, and they pour right into the new area. And this easy ballet of grazing is their daily shift. And so these animals aren't stressed. These animals are constantly getting new pasture. They're trained. They love it. And he does lots of experiments. This is the Millennium Feathernet. Millennium Falcon. Yeah, he's got all these funny names for these things. But this is another. Everything's based off grass where his operation is, because that's based off of sunlight, and so that's the best way to think about it. Sunlight is your annual budget. Your grass and soil is where you're storing that annual budget, and then the animals you run through it are the profit. So this is it's if you check out Salatin's semester, it goes in depth through his whole operation. That's by Acres USA and Verge Permaculture. Absolutely cannot recommend it enough. I even wrote a review on it. I watched the whole thing in detail. I even wrote a review on it for Permaculture Magazine North America. And that review is online on Salatin's semester's website as well. So something to check out for later study. This is amazing. The Fibreshed is a nonprofit organization that's encouraging people to embrace soil-to-soil clothing and textiles and fiber. So we need to be having natural processes, natural dyes. We need to have local designers and makers. We need to just use our soil and our farmlands properly. That's why they're there. We also need to take a look again at our waterways, our riparian areas, our inlets, our shores, our oceans. This is the Green Wave ocean farming operation in the Long Island Sound. And what's incredible about this is they're trying to fight the runoff from all the lawn fertilizers. It's feeding these plants, and so they're taking that kelp and putting it back into the soil as nitrogen. But they're also selling this food. And I have reservations about that because I know how much toxins there are in that water. And we really should be letting these things filter the toxins and not our livers and our brains and our bodies. Because I'd rather compost wildlife and have it all simplify and live their whole lives out and then clean by trapping that all in the soil through decomposition. The ocean has 4 types of soil. I had to look it up too. Isn't that crazy? So it's really important that we don't use ourselves as filters for the toxins, that as much as possible, because that's what causes our cancer. That's why it's spread, because instead of actually cleaning our environment and building soil and trapping these toxins, we keep eating them and trapping them in our food. That's why rice is full of arsenic, because it's a plant, it's an aquatic plant that's filtering it out of the water and soil. So Veta La Palma, if you guys have seen How I Fell in Love with a Fish, it's an amazing, I think Dan Barber is his name. He did a TED Talk on this place. Absolutely incredible. So Joel Salatin, you know how he's a grass farmer? These people are algae farmers. So they took an area that was once used for cattle, and it had all these canals, and they brought all the water back in, filled up the canals, and then let the algae bloom, which caused all this trophic cascade to happen, and eventually created the because the trophic cascade goes up. It eventually turned into one of the largest bird sanctuaries in North America. So incredibly special, incredibly powerful, and it's because they're partnering with nature. They're using natural cycles, and they don't drain this. They don't take all the fish out. They're not going for that. This is run like biologists would run it, marine biologists would run it. They're taking the abundance. And that's exactly it. That's where we need to get. We need to be taking the abundance, not the core, operate that grass down to more than 50%, because then it starts hurting the roots. So, it's just, I cover all this in my book. So, Masanobu Fukuoka, this man took 20 years by hand transforming his farm from one that was based on chemicals and machines to one based completely on organic, natural farming. He's the father of natural farming, and the way I farm, the way I garden, the way I do everything is most aligned to Elaine Ingham and Masanobu Fukuoka. And I have some biointensive techniques that I have added in, I mix a lot of things. But overall, it's Dr. Elaine Ingham's soil science combined with Masanobu Fukuoka was a scientist too. He was an agricultural scientist, and maybe that's why he got away with what he did, because people thought he was crazy, but he had the credentials, and so that's probably why. And he was as competitive as the top rice producers in Japan. And what's incredible is, if you don't know this, it's kind of gross, I guess, but they grow rice in these paddies, and the standing water goes anaerobic. It's just standing water, right? And so it bubbles and releases methane, which is an awful, awful greenhouse gas. So most rice comes from paddy systems that are actually contributing to the greenhouse effect. So climate change is being caused by rice consumption to a certain degree. But Masanobu Fukuoka showed that you don't even need to do that, and that's actually detrimental. He proved that you could flood the field and make it so that the clover, or this is barley in this case, he's sowing rice directly into barley here. You could flood it for a week or two, and what will happen is the clover will be like, oh, I'm feeling floody. And then you throw the rice in there, and the rice is like, I know what to do. Rice takes off, and then a few weeks later, clover's like, all right, I'm catching up. And then it comes back, but it's already too late. The rice has expressed itself, it's expressed its dominance, and he's got this rice field, and his rice was shorter, but it had more seed heads, and its roots were white and healthy and super deep. And you went to these other fields, they had short roots, and it was blackened roots, and it smelled putrid. It smelled like sewage, and that's what most rice paddies are like. So Masanobu Fukuoka proved that you can do something different, and more recently Ben Falk did this method in Vermont and grew rice, and I think he's still doing it. All right, so this just shows you here the clover, and you guys can see how little the clover is here, so this shows you how big the rice is. It's a grass. So this is Miracle Farm in Quebec. What's incredible about this is Stefan Sokobiak, the Permaculture Orchard is a documentary about this, has it set up so every week is a different row. So he doesn't go back to the same row but 2 to 3 times a year, and when he does, that's that market for that week. So you go down this whole row, you collect the understory, the overstory, you get all these vegetables and fruits, and then that's that week's CSA or farmer's market. And then he runs U-Picks this way too, and think about it, it's so easy, there's no wandering, it's like this row this week. This is what you can do. So it's incredible, and took just a little bit of research. He experimented with a lot of varieties. I think he experimented with over 600. They have 170 varieties right now. This is Grant Schultz Farm in Iowa City. As you can see here, right, it's on contour, there's a trees, it's a keyline design system. He's using the electric fencing to graze animals and keep the grasses down while the trees establish themselves. Curtis Stone here, see that this is like an Elliott Coleman style tool. I don't think this is an Elliott Coleman tool, but it has that hand drill attachment, which is so wild. This is a page from my new book. So, it's really important to recognize that yields are limitless. And the reboot really starts with farmers and ranchers. So we need to support farmers and ranchers or become the farmers and ranchers. And that doesn't take incredible amounts of education. I know there are people out there with programs that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I have sought to do the opposite. My permaculture gardening course, which started last night, and there's a few more hours left to sign up. I have people on there on scholarship, people on there who have hardship, who are in there for free. It's not about being elitist, it's about getting everyone the information, and that's why, anyone who contacts me who really wants to partake in this course, I'm totally willing to help and talk and figure out how we can get them in. We are now in discussion in the course about all of our different sites and all of our different conditions, and we're working together for the future. And this kind of thing, permaculture, it's taking off everywhere. It's taking off in schools and colleges and universities and companies, businesses, and governments all across the world, because it really solves problems and makes them easier. Because it partners with nature, and we are nature. We're part of nature. So when you go throughout your day this week, I want you to do me a favor. Ask yourself what kind of world you expect. What kind of future are you seeing when you look to the future? Do you see solutions? Do you see a bright future? Do you see answers? Because if you don't, I've got things to tell you and things to share. So if you are looking for hope, if you were looking for answers, check out my course, thepermaculturestudent.com, and it's Permaculture Gardening with Matt Powers. And I'm gonna be here all week. Next week I'll be doing the MOA conference, the Midwest Organic Association conference at Kansas City, Missouri. And so I'll be there most of the week with my family. We'll have a Baker Creek table. I'll be giving, I think, 3 talks and doing panels. It's gonna be a whirlwind. But I'm designing it so that every talk is different and every I fit as much information in as possible. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but every time I do a talk, I try to do a new talk. No matter what conference I'm at, no matter where I go or who I'm speaking to, I always try to improve it and create something new. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm going to see you guys tomorrow. Bye.